German engineering at its finest, as usual, from BeQuiet. If you remember my review of the Pure Base 500 FX, well, this one reminds me of it, but it's bigger, better, quieter. This is of course the Shadow Base 800 FX, word from a sponsor, and let's check out it in detail. Looking for affordable Windows or Office keys? Look no further, I got you covered. Head over to scdkey.com, pick your Windows edition, use my discount code LE25 to get a 25% on any Windows or Office products. Once you complete your order, after a few seconds you will receive your code. In Windows, go to Settings, there should be an Activate Windows prompt at the bottom. Click that, enter your code and wait for Windows to finish activation. To check the activation status, use the command prompt with the command slmgr.vbs/xpr and you should receive a notification that the machine is permanently activated. Once again, use code LE25 at scdkey.com. What will strike you immediately when you look at this case is its big mesh front face, and under there you can find 3140 Silent Wings 4 fans. But being the FX variant of the case, it means that it has RGB, and as the 500 model, this one also uses pogo pins for the contact, so you can safely pull the panel off without worrying about the wires, since there are no wires. There is a fine mesh dust cover here for all the fans, which is nice as it will block the dust coming in the case, but also full-length PSU dust cover pulled from the front of the case as well. These are the 140mm Silent Wings fans capable of running at 1500 RPM with an impressive airflow of 95.1 CFM and 1.49mm H2 of static pressure. They are of course PWM and come with a nice RGB ring around them while still being super quiet at only 23 decibels. But what is interesting here is that you can mount a 420mm radiator in the front as well. So this means that the case is huge. Technically yes, but it falls into a mid-tower category with the dimensions of 550 in depth, 247 wide and 522mm tall. The depth and the height of this case allows it to accommodate bigger radiators. So this is why you have the option to mount another 420mm radiator on the top of the case as well. The top has this magnetic mesh filter, but this is not the flimsy one. This one has a nice plastic frame and it looks like it belongs there. Not just those flimsy cheap magnetic filters, you know that I hate them. It also has a BeQuiet logo embossed here as well. The I/O panel is fairly simple, but it has everything you need. USB Type-C port, two USB 3.0 ports, big illuminated power button, mic and headphone jacks, and RGB control button for the front RGB LED strips and fans as well. The interior of the case is protected with a really thick tempered glass panel. It's a clear one since this is a white model of the case, easily removable with a twist of a thumb screw at the back. Removing the panel reveals a really huge interior. At first glance it seems as there are no holes for the cables, but they are right there at the top of the motherboard tray. So this makes cable management super easy as cables go directly down at the back of the case. You can also see a large opening at the back of the motherboard for easy CPU cooler installation as well. There is a metal bar in the middle of the case that hides the cables, the larger cable cutouts, which can be removed and repositioned as well in case you decide to use extended ATX boards, since you can of course do that, and all smaller variants as well. Right next to it is the trademark of the BeQuiet cases, the SSD mounting trays with the support for two 2.5-inch drives with a middle metal thingy that hides the connectors, so you can have your SSDs on a display here. I thought at first that you could remove it completely and gain space for side intake fans, but no side fan support here, unfortunately. But there is a bottom mounted fan support, hence this plastic shrouds or the airflow direction piece, which would then redirect the air coming from the bottom fan directly to the GPU. This bottom fan support is 120 or 140mm in size, which is an awesome thing to have. The PSU shroud has a completely open slit for unobstructed cable pass-through. Speaking of clearances, inside 430mm for the GPU and 180mm for the CPU heatsink towers. Impressive numbers nonetheless. At the rear side there is another 140mm Silent Wings fan, same as the front ones, but what is excellent here is the native support for vertical GPU mounting, since you can rotate the complete PCI bracket. What is even more excellent here, you are not limited in terms of GPU thickness, since 247mm of case width and no bars between PCI brackets will give you plenty of space for the chunkiest of the cards to be mounted vertically here without them even being close to the glass panel. Of course, the PCI riser is sold separately. Rear side of the case, when looked from behind, reveals that fans mounted here can be moved up or down in case they are interfering with the AIO up top or similar, and yes, you can mount 140 or 140mm fans here. The PSU is installed from the outside via the included bracket. Backside of the case uses a full metal panel which is held by two captive thumb screws, and it has a thick layer of insulation foam inside, which is responsible for that quiet part of the case. Of course, the real show begins here. Once the panel is removed, you can notice the following things. RGB and PWM fan hub, of course, you can't miss it at all as it sits on a removable hard drive tray that supports either two 2.5-inch drives or two 3.5-inch drives to be installed here. The whole tray can be either removed or repositioned below if you actually need it there. Cable zip tie points are present everywhere around the case. Each cable exiting hole has bent metal, so you won't cut your fingers when building, and you can't scratch your cables either. Nice quality of life feature. The fan and RGB hub can accept up to 8 PWM fans and 5V ARGB devices to be connected, and it uses SATA power, of course. If we look at a PSU chamber, it is super spacious, allowing you to mount up to 305mm long PSUs or up to 260mm PSUs in case you use the bottom fan spot. In theory, this is more than enough space for extremely clean cable management. But in case you use the included 3.5-inch drive cage bracket that can be positioned in 4 different spots, you will lose the bottom fan support and also that precious space for the lengthier PSUs. Hard drive cages are of course bought separately. And this brings this case to a maximum of 7 storage devices spaces here, 3 3.5-inch drive spaces in case you use the cage, or 4 if you remove the RGB controller, but why would you remove it? And 3 or 4 2.5-inch spaces in case you remove the RGB controller again, or 7 in total in case you use 2 hard drive caddies in the bottom and all empty spaces without removing the RGB controller. Under the PSU shroud there are 4 rubber feet that elevate the case enough for the fresh air to pass through for the PSU and that bottom fan in case you use it, and you can see the full length dust filter here as well. Pretty much this sums up the features of this case. It costs 180 euros for the black variant and 205 for the white one. It's a lot for the case, but believe me, this case is built like a tank. Metal here is at least 0.5mm thicker than on any other case out there. And given the fact that you're getting 4 amazing fans pre-installed along with the PWM and RGB fan hub, this price is exactly where it should be. Plus, this case, beside being super quiet, is also super cool both visually and literally. I wanted to make a silent editing machine in this case, so I used i9-12900K CPU paired with an Intel Arc A750 GPU, which is actually a great editing combo since it uses Intel Deep Link Hyper Encode function to edit videos faster. I also installed 2 NVMe drives, 4TB each and 32GB of DDR5 at 6000 MHz. The AIO of choice is the Deepcool LT720. Temperatures that I got are good given the fact that Intel Arc GPU is releasing a ton of heat inside the case as the card runs at 48 degrees while idling. During light loads it is around 55 degrees and when being pushed hard it can get up to 72 degrees. Not the greatest representative for cooling as it is also a stock non-AIB version of the card. But I wanted to see what the case could do. Since the GPU is pushing tons of heat all the time in the case, the CPU idle is affected, so it sits around 32 degrees opposed to the regular 27 degrees that it usually gets when I use a GPU that idles in lower 30s. While packed with a lighter load, the CPU is hovering around 45 to 46 degrees, which I didn't expect at all. I thought it would be around 55 mark, but Now it's more than okay. The 55 mark is reached while gaming, but never above that. And of course, if you stress test the CPU, it climbs up to 75 degrees. So in my book, the case performs excellently even if you give it a hot GPU to handle. I did not test it with GPU in vertical mode, but I believe that the GPU would only get hotter if installed vertically, and also I did not use the bottom fan at all. It might have aided the GPU to be a degree or two cooler. So in case you have a beefier GPU that has a much bigger heatsink on it, this case could handle it with ease. What is great in all of this is that this config right here is super quiet, and that was my goal anyway, to build an editing rig that can handle 4K and above editing with ease while being super quiet. In case you're building a gaming machine and such, I can highly recommend any BeQuiet case, as they are high quality at first place, they are functional with a lot of quality of life features, they are quiet, and they perform extremely well. So, like with cars, German engineering at its finest. So this is all for this time, guys. Sub to the channel, like and share the video, and I'll see you in the next one.